On this episode of the Naturist Living Show, we discuss aging clubs and an interview with Tina Sieg, who's traveling across North America.
This episode of the Naturist Living Show is brought to you by Bare Oaks Family Naturist Park. At Bare Oaks, we offer traditional naturist values in a modern setting. Free your body, free your mind. www.bareoaks.ca.
Welcome again, loyal listeners, to the Naturist Living Show. My name is Stéphane Deschaines. I'm your host for this episode, and I'm also the owner of Bare Oaks Family Naturist Park. On August 21st, 2009, Glen Echo Family Nudist Park sent a letter to its members informing them that after 54 years of operation, they will be closed on October 1st. They apparently sold the property to an individual who's turning it into a private residence. Whatever the future of that property, the sad news is a naturist club is disappearing from the Ontario landscape. So many people contacted me by email, by phone, or just talked to me and thought because Glen Echo is the closest club to Bare Oaks Family Naturist Park, they're only about 30 kilometers or 30 minutes away, that I'd be happy because I'd have less competition and certainly there'd be a whole influx of Glen Echo members looking for a new place to be. But I'm actually quite sad. I'm quite sad because, first of all, Glen Echo was a park that I belonged to for many years. My children, when they were younger, spent a lot of time there. I'm also sad for all the people who have been members forever, people who have raised their children there, their grandchildren, people who were born and raised on the property. It's like losing the family estate, the family compound, the family cottage. 54 years is a long time, and several generations have passed through there. But I'm also sad because I think that more clubs is better for the naturist scene than less clubs. In the Toronto area, based on a survey that the Federation of Canadian Naturists did in 1999, there's 400 to maybe 500,000 people who are interested in naturism. And yet if you add up all the clubs together, you'd only get to maybe 6,000 members at most, and that's probably on the high side. I think there's a lot of people out there that are interested in naturism, and don't belong and don't visit clubs. And having one less club isn't going to help. Most clubs are, certainly for campsites, are pretty full. I've always said, if there was only one golf course in the Toronto area, there probably wouldn't be a lot of golfers. And it's the same thing with naturism. The more clubs, the better. In fact, I'm working with the remaining 3 clubs in the Toronto area to do some combined advertising, because I think we all recognize that we're not competing with each other. The reason that those other hundreds of thousands of people aren't naturists has more to do with the fact that they don't know the opportunity exists. In fact, I regularly, talk with people, and they say, "What do you do?" And I say, "I own a naturist park," and they go, "Oh, that's interesting." And they say, "I didn't know such places existed in Ontario," and that's a very, very common response amongst the textile crowd. And so that shows there's a lot of opportunity for promotion and marketing, because the people who indicate in the survey they're interested obviously aren't coming because they don't know. But I think Glen Echo was actually failing. They had fewer and fewer members, which is why the owners, Eddie and Mary Todorowski, were forced to sell. I assume they were forced to sell. I don't know their circumstance as to why they decided to sell, but I know that the membership there was dropping steadily. And it's an example of, naturism is not dropping. Glen Echo was experiencing a drop in members because they hadn't kept with the times. People were camping at Glen Echo in sites without electricity, without running water. That was fine in the 60s. People were willing to rough it when they were camping like that. They would spend whole summers that way. Don't get me wrong, there was water available in the washrooms and the bathhouse and showers and all that. But at your site, there was nothing. And today, people come in with their trailer, RV, and they expect 30, 50 amp electricity because they have a dishwasher, they have a microwave, and they expect water, and they expect hookups. And that's not just typical of naturism, it's typical of all camping. plus other amenities, internet available, activities, events. And sadly, these were all things that Glen Echo and other clubs that seem to be having a hard time attracting members have difficulty getting to, or they're not good at marketing themselves anymore. Maybe the membership base has aged, or maybe they spent too many years with a very healthy membership and they weren't really interested in any further growth because they thought they were fairly full. And so they stopped marketing, they stopped improving. But eventually, sadly, some of those members die off. And you end up with a population of generally elderly naturists, which when young people come, find the place a little too dull, sedate, and a bit like a retirement home. And this is the problem with a lot of clubs. It's not because naturism is having trouble attracting members. There are many clubs that are growing and are very healthy. We have absolutely no problems attracting new young families at Bare Oaks. Our marketing is bring them in all the time. And most of our growth has been with people who've never visited a club before because they weren't aware any existed. Or if they've been to clubs, they weren't happy with what they found, but they like it here. So it is sad, though, to lose another club. I would have preferred to see somebody else take over Glen Echo and work with the rest of us in promoting naturism in the Toronto area. We would have all been ahead if that had happened. And we're also losing what was the oldest club in Ontario. Glen Echo started in 1955. There was a group of individuals that formed the Toronto Gymnosophical Society. They were actually a group of members from a previous group called Sunglade. Sunglade members, the club existed from 1949 to 1953. They were sort of a non-landed club. They used other people's property. And in 1953, after a dispute that failed, and some of those people got together to form the TGS, the Toronto Gymnosophical Society, who in turn, Eddie and Mary Todorowsky, who are the founders and up until now owners of Glen Echo, they bought the land for Glen Echo and leased it to the club because the club itself was having trouble finding a way of financing a land purchase. So they stepped up, they purchased the land, 100 acres, and they started doing the development. But in the mid-60s, things weren't going very well, apparently, for the TGS group. And so Glen Echo became essentially a private naturist nudist park. TGS, a group of individuals that was a cooperative social club, ceased to exist, and Glen Echo became a private business. It certainly wasn't the oldest club, and nor was Sunglade. When you read Dr. Jim Woycke's book on the history of nudism in Canada, there are clubs going back to the very beginning of the 20th century. But Glen Echo was the oldest continuously operating club. And the oldest club now, actually, is Sunny Glades. No relation to Sunglade. Sunny Glades is in southwestern Ontario near Chatham. It's owned by Stan Wortner, and I actually had an opportunity to sit down with Stan in August and interview him about the start of his club and what it was like in the beginning. He still runs a very active club, and he would like to pass the torch in the future, but he seems to have maintained a club that's still actually growing. All their sites are full and doing quite well. Very active membership. It's a beautiful club. The property is incredible. Stan's always had a passion for trees and nature and fauna, and he's over the 50 years that he's had the club, he's cultivated that and worked with nature to make it an even more beautiful and more interesting property. Stan actually was a member of Sun Valley Gardens as well, which is, I should mention, because in terms of history, that's the most interesting club in Ontario. Sun Valley Gardens existed from 1954 to 1982, and Carl Rule was the first public owner of a club. He was very promotion-oriented, very public in promoting naturism. He held open houses. He held all kinds of events. They got a lot of press. And not everybody agreed with what Carl Rule and Sun Valley Garden was about. The park is near St. Catharines. It's actually in Font Hill, which is in the St. Catharines, Niagara Falls area, for those who aren't completely familiar with the Ontario geography. And that park, it was very small, 25 acres, but very active. And he encouraged people to start their own clubs as well. But also a lot of people left because he was known to be fairly autocratic about how he ran the club. And a number of people left and started other clubs. And in fact, almost every club in Ontario owes its existence somehow to people who were going to Sun Valley Gardens. And certainly Eddie and Mary Todorowsky of Glen Echo were visitors to Sun Valley Gardens before they joined the TGS and started Glen Echo. And Stan Wortner also was a visitor to Sunny Glades regularly and left to decide to start his own. And in other clubs, Ponderosa and by association, the Four Seasons were also founded by people who were visitors to Sunny Glades and Lily Valley, which is still existing. But now, with the closure of Glen Echo, Sunny Glades and Stan Wortner have the oldest club in Ontario. So let's listen to my interview with Stan Wortner of Sunny Glades. When did you first start in naturism?
Okay, probably, I would say 1954, something like that. I had a 53 Ford, and I wrote a letter to Carl, but at that time, what letters were going out to British Columbia, and it was Mildred Harris, and I forget her husband's name.
Ray Connett.
And then they forwarded my letter to Carl. And so my wife and I went up to see what it was about. And it was pretty primitive. I mean, it was primitive in the sense that he had some trails on that greasy clay, and he had to put sand on them so you wouldn't slip in wet weather. And he had a shower, 4 poles, and the poles were fresh cut, and they were still growing leaves on them, and this was his shower. But to us, it was a new experience, and I was more or less familiar with the principles of nudism or nudity in a social environment. And so we went up, and we enjoyed ourselves, and then we went back up the following years for a short vacation, mini vacation. And then from there on, Carl was the type of person that was trying to encourage a lot of people who visited there, if they were remote or not close to him, to start their own nudist parks. So he encouraged a number of people to make this attempt. In hindsight, a lot of the attempts ended up as failures, only because probably they were undercapitalized. Now, we're back in the 50s.
Yeah.
We're back in the 50s when probably the average wage, if you made $50 a week, you made more than an average wage, or say $200 a month or something like that. It would be so that property, was still cheap, but you still had to make that hurdle of buying and then developing it. And a lot of the people who bought property weren't funded well enough to expand. So there were a lot of attempts, a number of attempts actually, and the successful ones, Eddie and Mary at Glen Echo, or TGS as they called it, they were the ones that were successful. And we bought our property in '59, and I don't say we were successful, but we're still here.
Now, what drove you to do that? Why did you decide you wanted to start your club?
Well, I wasn't so interested in a club within a club frame of mind. Never had that in mind. I was always interested in conservation and a whole lot of other side things. And this property, as it turned out, and I looked at other properties in the general area. Looking at properties, I was looking for a number of things. Water, and since I was in the county area, a lot of areas have very difficult problems with getting water. Like you either have to go deep, and you might get sulfur, you might get salt, or you might not get a good well. So when I was up here, and we were also looking, because I had familiarity with clay farms, I wanted something sand, so you could It was, and this property here, it was up for sale. It just been posted, and I walked on it, and we had a heavy rain just prior to that. When I say heavy rain in the fall, like 2 or 3 inches, and there wasn't a speck of water laying here anywhere on the sand. And of course, being down at Sun Valley Gardens, you got a taste of what clay would do to you. Great for growing grapes and things like that, but as it turns out. But here it was sand, so this is why I settled here. And the price was right. And I've got 2 kids, 1 dog, and a wife. I'm living in a little cottage, 16 by 24, with my running water consisted of a pipe coming up through the floor, running cold water. My outdoor toilet was on skids, and I dug a hole underneath of it, and I actually virtually pioneered, because the second year that I was here, my cottage wasn't occupied, and I had 3 break-ins in one winter. That type of thing. So we moved up here and really and truly pioneered. And we enjoyed it, but we were without a lot of things, a lot of services. I had 1 telephone and 1 television and that type of thing. And
you worked hard.
Well, we probably did. Never really give it much thought as far as work is concerned.
So, how was it different running a naturist or a nudist park in 1959 from today?
Well, the rules and the laws of a number of things were much different than they are today. See, a lot of people forget that we had a lot of blue laws back in the 50s. And by blue laws, I mean, just for a good example, to go and get a case of beer at the beer store, you had to sign a piece of paper saying that you were 21 years old and that you were going to use this and take this home. But when you took it home, you couldn't sit on your front step or your front lawn drinking it. A lot of people forget what freedoms are all about. Not necessarily talking about taking your clothes off. Just a matter of just a whole lot of other things. In the matter of social behavior that was regulated by bylaw or provincial law. We had no problems establishing the park. I had a lawyer in Chatham go through the statutes to see what the Canadian law had to say about nudity in public or private, and its consequences. So he researched it, and there was nothing that said, there were a lot of things that said if you were an exhibitionist or in view from public property, then you could be charged, but not on private property. We also went from the legal office, the law office in Chatham, and went around to see he was a district inspector of the OPP headquarters that was number 1 headquarters, and that dealt with Essex and Kent County. Had audience with him and told him who we were, what we were going to do, and he said it wouldn't have any problem with anybody from their side of the force. Thank us for coming in and everything else, and give us a word of advice. The advice was, if you can get along with your neighbors, you'll get along with us. All I can remember is he was obviously an Englishman, and he had the name of Inspector Ramsbottom. But he was nice, and he was knowledgeable. He understood what nudism was all about, probably from the UK or European side of things. We're talking 1959. And from there on in, we just, gradually went up. We didn't push a lot of buttons or offended a lot of people because, first of all, I didn't have any neighbors on the concession. I still don't have any neighbors. I have one neighbor across the road from me, and the other neighbors, there's some behind me and some down at the end of the road. So I haven't really any close neighbors. And I have the Canadian National Railroad on bordering a small portion of the property. Probably the only problem we had was that since this was a woodlot and is in an area with a lot of woodlots, come the autumn, a lot of the locals were in a habit of using this as their private hunting preserve. So we had, since I was opposed to hunting, we ran into some problems that way. Problems in the sense in enforcing trespassing in the sense of getting people out of here.
How did you get members? How did you advertise, and who were you targeting? Who did you want as members at the time?
Well, we put an ad in the paper. They refused to take my ad. I don't know why that was, and I probably still have his letter on file. But I persisted, and they relinquished, and then I started to advertise in the newspapers. Myself and Ted Lasecki, he was advertising in a few years later. Same paper, and Holiday Valley, which had opened up. They were also the three ads were all listing in the newspaper. Got to find that after a while I wasn't getting the results that I should be getting. Too much letter writing, too much correspondence, and I had a listing in some of the nudist magazines from the United States, Mervyn Mounts' publications, just a listing. And so I was getting inquiries from Detroit, Michigan area.
Were you like some of the clubs that you only took married people at the time, or?
No, I didn't have that policy at all. I had a different approach. I was taking things from invite them out, and they looked like they could pass the test, give everybody a fair chance. And some people never, they said they were coming out and never did. And there was a number of situations that afterwards, looking back, I questioned the motives of the people that I actually was getting inquiries from. A lot of them, held their light under the proverbial bushel basket. To give you some idea how sensitive some people were, I had some people from the United States driving great big Cadillacs and things like that, and they park their car and cover their license plates. That's it's one of the things that you kind of wonder, whether their positions were in jeopardy. We had some members here too that didn't wanted total anonymity, just absolutely total anonymity. And I think there's still a twinge of that. Mm-hmm. That here they'll go, people will come in, or they don't come in. They might live in Chatham, mm-hmm. and they'll go to Four Seasons, or they'll go to the United States someplace, or down in Florida, and they never come here. Mm-hmm. Simply because they're either business people, and they think it's too close to home, and what if somebody sees them that knows them? We didn't proselytize, in a sense. Every place we went to, we did say, hey, we own the nudist park or anything else. If they're subject enough, what do you do for a living, or what do you do? So we were candid about what we did, and never had any side effects that we're aware of. The people who are in business in the community, we patronized, and some people in the community that were in the business that took advantage of some of our members. In other words, doing some electrical work or selling them something, and because they were coming from here, they thought they could charge them whatever they wanted. Well, we got that straightened around real quick.
You were telling me you had some problems with some people that almost brought your club down in the beginning.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's true. I guess maybe as knowledgeable I was about things and being out in the real world working, I didn't realize that some people had a taste for swapping wives and swapping husbands and whatever, and promiscuous in that sense, and I did run into that element, and but I found that very discouraging first couple of years, or at least for when it happened. These were married couples and church-going professional people, engineers and school teachers and all that kind of, in that. Not that I was, setting them up on a pedestal, but these are the ones that were the instigators of the whole thing. And I was approached and said, well, I could make a lot of money if I just let them run the park because they seem fit. And anyway, we came to parting ways, and I made that quite clear to the one fellow that's from Detroit. And he would probably he was an engineer and had money and everything else. And I said, why didn't you buy your own property? Well, the answer was, well, we don't want to own property. We just want somebody else to run it.
When you look at where nudism is going today, and how it's changed, is there anything that's not going in the right direction, in your opinion?
I think, there's some things that always bothered me in my early days. We could have gotten beaches along Lake Erie. There are all kinds of beaches. One of the best beaches in the world, along Lake Erie, south of here, was offered to the county for $100,000, about a mile, a beach. The rank and file, the wardens and the reeves of the township said it was too much money, so the real estate got into it. And you should see it now. It's a mess. It's a mess. Beautiful, pristine beach. My wife was on council too. She was on municipal council, township council, but township council because we were a small township at that time. We had a reeve and no deputy reeve. So the reeve he sat on council in various functions. So the council members themselves divvied up their various committees they want to sit on. And Pearl at that time, she sat on Lower Thames Conservation Authority, and she had already made it, and she was quoted in the papers because she was asking if council would approve a nude beach. And she got a lot of publicity and a lot of favorable comment, but nothing came out of it. Nothing came out of it. It was one of those unfortunate things. I think we missed the boat then because the Attorney General at the time was agreeable. The Attorney General at the time, and I can't remember who he was. It wasn't Roy Murtry, but somewhat maybe just prior to that. And they could have stamped nudism out, but they were agreeable. That's why Carl Rule and a whole lot of other people were able to start.
Since we're talking about history, I thought I'd play a song that I found on the Internet Archive at archive.org. It's a very interesting repository where people put up things that are public domain, and a lot of it very old. This song is by a gentleman named Billy Mitchell. It's called The Bumble Bee Invaded a Nudist Colony. It's a 1920s comedy song, and it comes from a 78 RPM record that somebody has converted into an audio files. So here is the song, The Bumblebee Invaded a Nudist Colony by Billy Mitchell.
Did you ever hear the story about the bumblebee who gave a cocktail party for his family? And when he got as high as he could be, he invaded a nudist colony. Buzz, 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 oh my, oh me. Buzz, 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 oh golly gee. Buzz, 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 oh what a spree. When the bumblebee invaded the nudist colony. Now Sister Jenny, wearing just her birthday suit, was strutting around the colony acting like she was cute. She plainly thought she was just about it until that bumblebee stung her on a big fat buzz, 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 oh my, oh me. Buzz, 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 oh golly gee. Buzz, 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 it was an awful spree when the bumblebee invaded the Nudist Colony. Mama Daisy acting like a baby girl. Naked is the first day she came in the world. She was walking around acting like a nut until that bumblebee stung her on a big fat buzz, 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 oh my, oh me. Buzz, 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 oh golly gee. Buzz, 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 it was an awful spree when the bumblebee invaded the Nudist Colony. Now, Big Fat Bill was naked as he could be. He was happy to be living in the colony. Old Bill got tired and laid down in the grass. Then the bee came along and stung him on his big fat buzz, 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 oh my, oh me. Buzz, 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 oh golly gee. Buzz, 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 it was an awful spree when the bumblebee invaded the Nudist Colony. Bop.
At the beginning of August 2009, and by the way, if you wonder why I always add the year when I mention a date, it's because you may be listening to this podcast right when it comes out. And many of our subscribers eagerly await each episode, so they listen to it right away. But because it sits on the internet for potentially forever, I have to keep in mind that some people may be listening to this years after I originally recorded it, which is why I say August 2009 as opposed to saying the beginning of August. So anyway, back to my story. At the beginning of August 2009, we had a really interesting old trailer pull-in with a young woman, and she came in and registered in the office. She'd made a reservation, and I was kind of intrigued, so we were chatting, and her name is Tina Sieg, and she's coming from California, and she is traveling around North America. Her objective is to spend a year just traveling and camping in her old trailer and discovering North America. And her very first stop was Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park. And I was really intrigued with that. And I said, so are you a California naturist? Of course, lots of people in California are naturists with all the clothing optional beaches and the weather there. But no. She once when she was about 9, she had visited a naturist park. She had some faint memories of that. But mostly she was here. And this was really her first experience, and she dove right into it, and she was very comfortable, and she thought it would be an interesting start to her trip. And so what follows is my discussion with Tina Sieg.
My name is Tina Sieg, and I'm 26, and I'm a freelance writer and photographer. I've been working in newspapers and magazines for the last 5 years, and I'm currently freelance. And I am traveling around Canada and the U.S., in a 1969 Bulls Aero trailer, and I'm just going to be out for a year, and I'm going to see what happens. Hopefully I'll be able to support myself through my writing and photography, but my main goal is to have some sort of venture that leaves me different on the other side.
So what inspired you? How did you get started with this idea? How did you create this project?
Well, there's a couple of answers to that question. One of them is that when I was little, my family traveled in a 1967 school bus for a couple of years. And so that sort of set the precedent for this, this trip even being something that would come to my mind. And I kind of wanted, those are really precious memories for me. So I kind of wanted to recapture that sense of exploration. But also, when I graduated college, I was dating someone, a Canadian actually, who my dad did not really appreciate. And so his idea was, instead of me going back to the East Coast and marrying this person, maybe I should just go travel around in a trailer. And at that point, I wasn't going to do it because the idea scared me too much. But now, after 3 years of living on my own, I think it's kind of finally time to do something that's sort of out there.
Now, you're not a naturist, but your very first stop on this adventure is in Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park. Why is that?
Well, I don't know if I'm a naturist or not yet. That's because I went to naturist parks when I was little, and when we were on that trip, I spoke about. And so I wanted to see if I wanted to get back into it, and as a writer and as a photographer, the easiest way for me to understand a group of people is to be there in a way where I'm writing about people. Like that to me is something that gives me an opportunity to see where people are coming from and hear their stories that I wouldn't if I wasn't sort of on a writing mission.
So when you were young, how young were you when you were last in a naturist park, and whereabouts was it?
Well, we started when I was about 9, and then we ended when I was about 11. So I'd say probably the most recent one was somewhere in the south, probably when I was 11, 10.
And what are your memories of that?
Oh, they're really fun. They're really upbeat. I mean, I didn't think anything bad about it. My parents are pretty out there anyway, and we never wore bathing suits. We always had hot tubs, and we never wore bathing suits and hot tubs, so it just seemed like a natural extension of that.
So you got here 2 days ago, and you took your clothes off. Tell me about that experience. How did it go? How did it feel? How hard was it to do?
It wasn't hard at all. I was really pressed for time because we were going to this beach outside of Toronto on this island, and so and the bus was leaving really soon, so I had to just strip down really fast and run to the bus. So it didn't give me a chance to actually worry about it, and that was fine. Like once I did it, I mean, there was about a 30-second adjustment period, and then that was it.
And living 3 days like this, what's been your impression, your feelings?
I've been really amazed at the community that's here. That's been the biggest. That's the biggest. That is what has left the biggest impression upon me. I come from a family of fairly individual, solitary folks. We don't do a lot of things like with our neighbors or with clubs. So this is sort of new. And I'm really, as a single person, I'm really enjoying it. So I that's been the biggest thing. I've met some people who are really friendly and really nice. And I really love that. And whether I will continue this or not, I think would be very dependent on people I meet later on down the road. Like, I wouldn't want to be at a naturist park if the people weren't really welcoming. But if they were, I think that it would feel really nice.
It's interesting that the biggest impact hasn't been the nudity, which is, until you try it, of course. We always say that the nudity is, you get used to it very quickly and it's not a big deal. But the question is, do you think that the nudity impacted your experience in terms of the people? Do you think it would be different if everybody here was clothed than if it was a traditional textile park?
Oh, definitely. Well, I mean, also, I'm coming from a different culture where I'm not sure coming from the Western United States, what the difference between a textile campground there and a textile campground here would be. But there, you go to a campground, everyone is very much on their own. They're with their big group of their family or their friends, and everyone's, probably friendly and drinking. Oh, okay. Everyone's, drinking beer or whatever they're doing, but it's all very friendly, but it's all very insular. So I think that if I was so I don't really know the difference, but if I were here in Canada at a textile campground, we wouldn't all already have one thing in common. And so I think that because we do, it's like everyone's really open to talking. And also because I have this, I'm writing this story, people are friendly and open to letting me hear their story, So I think there's definitely a difference with the nudity. I think that it takes away one barrier, and the fact that I'm here, if I was here as a clothed journalist, I think that it'd be terrible. So for me, this is like an experiment, but it's also a chance to, I don't know, experience something that I really want to, and I don't think I would feel maybe a little bit uncomfortable if I wasn't writing a story, just because sometimes you need a feeling of permission somehow to enter into something new.
Mm-hmm. So you talked about the bus, and as you alluded, you were nude on the bus, as everyone else was, to go down to a clothing-optional beach called Hanlon's Point in Toronto. Was there a difference between that experience there and the experience here?
Well, big time. I mean, that was the first thing I did. So that was really... That was still a little... I was nervous, not on a naked level, but on a social level, just because I didn't know anybody. I also got a really gnarly sunburn there, so that sort of colored the experience a little bit for me. But there was a whole bunch of people there who weren't in the group. Like, it was a big beach, so you have all the different kinds of folks, and you have some people who I think were Italian, wearing little, like, string bikini bottoms and stuff like that. And here, everyone's definitely more on the same page. Like, definitely families, definitely couples, or definitely, some single folks who are just here with really pure intentions. And at the beach, you didn't really know in the same way. So I didn't feel a sense of community on the beach as I do here. It's much more palpable here.
Now, at 26, you have nearly 3 decades of socialization in you. And no matter how open-minded your parents are, you live in a world where your body's a bad thing, particularly as a woman. You're supposed to hide it. If you expose it, you're somehow promiscuous, perhaps. Certain parts of your body are supposed to be only for sex and hidden from everyone. Did you find shedding that? Did you have any of those feelings, thoughts? Did you have any reactions? Were you soul-searching a little bit?
The only thing I really felt was it was nice to be able to wear so little, because I don't really dress provocatively at all. But I have had a push from my parents, one parent in particular, but I won't, throw them under the bus, but of dressing in a way so that it doesn't accentuate the parts of your body that are, like, chubby. Like, if you wear like a sleeveless T-shirt that's kind of showing off your arms, like, do you really want to do that? And it's not like, that's not a sexual thing. That's just like maybe that looks unflattering, And here, that is totally gone. And that's the biggest freedom for me, is that there's no question about being unflattering. Like, your body just is as it is, and there's no cut or tailoring of clothing that's going to, change that. You just get to be, which is beautiful.
So it sounds like it was fairly easy for you. And so my question is, were you surprised how easy it was? As you were driving here, you spent a few days driving, knowing where you were coming. What were you thinking? What were you expecting?
I didn't really know what to think or what to expect. I mean, I drove about 1,900 miles in 4 days, and I had a bunch of writing assignments to send off to a travel guide that I was working for, and a couple newspapers that were back in Utah. And so I didn't think about anything. I just thought about doing 600 miles a day, 500 miles a day, whatever. I was kind of surprised at how easy it was. I was more surprised at how easy it was socially. The nakedness didn't really make me nervous. It didn't. That I knew that was going to be okay, because I knew from talking to Paul at Going Natural, magazine, that there was definitely something here that was I don't know. That there was going to be like a friendliness here they didn't have to worry about. It wasn't going to be some austere community I was going to have to break into. Mm-hmm. So I was just going to let that play out. And it did really well. So tell me more about the trailer you have. Is really cool. And it's this awesome retro trailer. Tell me more about that. Well, thank you. So my trailer is 26 feet. It comes from the same era as kind of those old Airstreams that people are so familiar with. The difference is, instead of the old Airstreams mostly are really they're really rounded, and they're like a really shiny metal. Mine is aluminum as well, but it's like it has a dull sheen that it was built, and that's the kind of metal it is. And it also has gold running stripes down each side, and it's square. It's like squared off, kind of like a boxcar instead of round, which is actually cool because it gives you more headroom. And I lived in it for 1.5 years in New Mexico, 6 months in Portland, Oregon, and it's really comfortable, but it has hardly any insulation, so it forces me to live a semi-naturist life anyway because I have to go with the weather.
Yeah, I like the old lamps, the lamps with lampshades you have in it and everything. It has a real kind of feel of what year is it? 1967, you said?
69.
1969 trailer. When you're in it, do you ever feel like you're going back in time? Do you get any funny feelings that way?
Especially when the holding tanks start leaking. Then I get a real sense of the age of the trailer. I had to have an old trailer because the new trailers, almost to a T, they all feel like kind of cheap hotel rooms, even if you spend $100,000 on them. And it's not to disparage anyone, because it is nice to have all those amenities and the insulation and the holding tanks that don't, leak. That's great. But there's something about the old construction that's really comforting and really homey. And on the inside, the colors are like the scheme of like teal and blonde wood and like cream colors, so it's all very bright. And when we were traveling around in that bus, it was a bus that my father completely remodeled. I mean, it was like you wouldn't even have known that it was a school bus. It was like this flat nose thing with like a completely homey interior. And so for me, I had to have that. Otherwise, I would just go stir crazy in some little, clapboard blue tinted box. So,
how hard was it to find? Because you wanted one obviously that was in good condition.
It was interesting because they're actually very hard to find. You can find Airstreams anywhere. Airstreams get really expensive if you get anything that's short. But if you got a 26-foot Airstream, it might cost you, I don't know, somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000. But Bull's Arrows are very rare, and they're actually kind of cheap. So I didn't even know I wanted a Bull's Arrow. It's just that was the one trailer I found on eBay that looked really good. And so it was I was living in San Francisco, in California, and the trailer was down Bakersfield, which is in Southern California, I don't know, maybe 4 hours south. And so we just called up the people and said, well, we're not going to bid on this without having seen it. But we drove down there, my father and I, and we saw it and we liked it. And then we bought it, just outright from them. So it was easy, but it was lucky that I found it.
So tell me more about your planned trip. This is your first stop. From here, where are you going to go? It's a year. Where do you plan on going?
Well, I'm really intrigued by the East Coast because I lived on the West almost all of my life. I really want to go up into northern, I want to go into eastern Canada a little bit more. I want to see Montreal. I want to see Nova Scotia. I want to see Prince Edward Island. I really want to get back into Maine and into Vermont and New Hampshire. Just because when you live in the wide open spaces, it's wonderful, but you are always curious what it would be like to be just a little bit more hemmed in by the world. And, quaintness is sort of not really something that happens in the West as it does on the East.
Hopefully by the time it gets really cold, though, you'll be further south.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, that's the thing, too. I mean, so I really can't be in weather that's any less than freezing. So I'm gonna go down into Florida for a little bit, but really Texas, Louisiana, I really want to get to. And Texas stays hot much longer than it ever should. So I'll be down there probably by the time it gets chilly.
Now, despite the fact your first stop was a naturist park, this is not a naturist trip. So are you planning on stopping at any other naturist places along the way?
Well, yeah, actually I am. And I would love to have that be part of my writing experience, is writing about these different naturist places. And I already, I talked to, Paul at Going Natural and Nikki Hoffman, who does N Magazine down in the States. And so I'm going to write for them, but also I just spoke with a fellow who's a travel writer and a naturist. And he might help me contact these other magazines, like one in Australia and one in England. And to me, like, that would be so amazing, because it would kind of get me into these communities that not all naturist communities are easy to just be part of, because some of them are more a little bit more exclusive, because they want to, protect what they have, which I think makes complete sense.
So if people want to follow you, is there a way they can follow your trip and read your writings about your experiences as you go?
Yes, there is. I have a blog, and it's my first name and last name, but my name is so complex that I'm sure that there'll be many there'll be many misfirings when people try to find it. But it's just tinasieg.com, and it's S as in Sam, Tina, S as in Sam, IEG. And if you type up my name, Tina Sieg, it'll be the first thing that comes up, because there's only really one person with my name. And the blog will be up, it should be up by the time this podcast comes out, pretty much, or pretty soon. And it's just going to be a, daily, weekly, monthly experience of my trip with pictures and, perhaps little stories about people I meet along the way and places that I go.
Sounds awesome. Of course, we'll put a link to that in the show notes so that our listeners can just click on it without having to figure out how to spell it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for today's episode of the Naturist Living Show. As usual, we always love to hear back from you. Send us your comment at naturistliving@bareoaks.ca, or you can leave a voicemail at area code 253-369-9383. You can now also subscribe to our Twitter feed. Well, it's the Bare Oaks Twitter feed, but you'll get a notification whenever there's a new podcast, as well as new blog postings on the Bare Oaks blog. It's Twitter/Bare Oaks Park. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back next month with another episode, one of several that are actually already in production. Take care.
This episode of the Naturist Living Show was brought to you by Bare Oaks Family Naturist Park. Traditional naturist values in a modern setting. Traditional values means that naturism is more than just taking your clothes off. It is a life philosophy with physical, psychological, environmental, social, and moral benefits. Bare Oaks Family Naturist Park strives to promote those naturist values in a modern setting that provides the amenities and services that our members and visitors expect. Free your body, free your mind. Learn more at www.bareoaks.ca.